Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we begin tonight's game, I wanted to ask a question. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out today's sponsor, Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them for getting the best value of my extra cards and my extra bulk. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have three main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best price for your cards, including your bulk. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of standard service and then charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the description below or use the promo code POWER, you will also get 10% off of their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Drake, piloting Najeela the Blade Blossom. This is a turbo ad nauseum version of Najeela that also packs common one-card win cards that win the game with its commander. Drake's opening hand contains a Vampiric Tutor, Swan Song, Force of Will, Jeweled Lotus, Command Tower, Polluted Delta, and his London Mulligan is Thassa's Oracle. Next, we have Cal, piloting Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. This deck leverages its commander and undying creatures to create a loop that draws cards and wins the game. Cal's opening hand contains a Swamp, Mox Opal, Vampiric Tutor, Opposition Agent, Chrome Mox, and his London Mulligans are Phyrexian Tower and Akadeem's Awakening. After that, we have our Mox Pearl patron Sean, piloting Omnath, Locus of Creation. This deck leverages its commander along with Landfall, Light Stacks, and Combat Beats to win the game. Sean's opening hand contains a Collector Oof, Eternal Witness, Lotus Cobra, Silence, Misty Rainforest, Windswept Heath, and a Stomping Ground. Finally, we have our Mox Pearl patron Charles, piloting 8.5 Tails. This is a Death and Taxes style deck that taxes opponents' resources and eventually wins through combat. Charles' opening hand contains a Winds of Abandon, Sword of Feast and Famine, Weathered Wayfarer, Sword of Fire and Ice, Swords to Plowshares, and 2 Plains. Without further ado, let's kick off this Callous Cautious Calibrated Calling. Drake had the best wall graffiti and gets to start us off. Drake draws a card for turn and plays a Command Tower. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He cracks his Lotus to help cast his commander, Najeela the Blade Blossom. Drake passes. Cal draws a card for turn and plays a Swamp. He casts a Chrome Mox imprinting Pawn of Ulamog. Cal passes. Sean draws and plays a Windswept Heath. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He casts a Birds of Paradise and ends his turn. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts Swords to Plowshares targeting Najeela. In response, Drake casts Swan Song. Swords is countered and Charles creates a 2/2 bird. Charles passes. During his upkeep, Drake casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He draws and plays a Plateau. He moves to combat and attacks Cal with Najeela. Najeela triggers and Drake creates a 1/1 warrior tapped and attacking Cal. Cal takes it and Drake ends his turn. At the end of Drake's turn, Cal casts his own Vampiric Tutor. He also fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. The turn moves to Cal. Cal draws and casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Mox Opal. He casts his commander, Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. Cal passes. Sean draws and starts off his turn by casting Lotus Cobra. He plays a Stomping Ground into play untapped, paying 2 life. Lotus Cobra triggers and Sean adds a green. He casts Collector Oof. Everyone is the big sad as Sean passes to Charles. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He moves to combat and attacks Drake with his bird. Drake takes it, and in his second main phase, Charles casts Winds of Abandon targeting Najeela. Najeela is finally exiled, and Drake searches his library for a basic, failing to find. Charles ends his turn. Drake draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Derevi, Imperial Tactician. It enters and Drake untaps his Command Tower. He moves to combat and attacks Charles with his warrior. Charles takes it, Derevi triggers, and Drake untaps his Underground Sea. Drake passes to Cal. During his upkeep, Cal loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws, takes no actions due to Collector Oof, and passes the turn. Sean draws and plays a Fiery Islet. Cobra triggers and Sean adds a blue. He taps his Fiery Islet to help cast his commander, Omnath, Locus of Creation. It enters and Sean draws. He moves to combat and attacks Charles with Lotus Cobra. Charles takes it and Sean ends his turn. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts Weathered Wayfarer. He casts his commander, 8.5 Tails. He moves to combat and attacks Cal with his bird. Cal takes it and Charles ships the turn to Drake. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Charles with Derevi. Charles takes it, Derevi triggers, and Drake untaps Derevi. Drake ends his turn. During his upkeep, Cal wins his mana crypt roll. He draws and casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Cal passes. Sean draws and plays a Misty Rainforest. Omnath triggers and Sean gains 4 life. Cobra triggers and he adds a green. He cracks his Misty Rainforest, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. Omnath triggers and Sean adds 4 mana. Cobra triggers and he adds a green. He casts Eternal Witness. It enters and Sean returns Misty Rainforest to his hand. He casts Growth Spiral. He draws a card and puts Misty Rainforest onto the battlefield. Omnath triggers and deals 4 to each opponent. Cobra triggers and adds a green. Sean casts Null Rod. Drake and Cal sink their heads as Sean gives the turn to Charles. Charles draws and activates Weathered Wayfarer. In response, Sean cracks his Misty Rainforest, pays a life, and fetches up a volcanic island onto the battlefield. Omnath triggers and Sean gains 4. Cobra triggers and adds a blue. Then Charles fetches up an Urza Saga into his hand. He plays an Urza Saga for turn, getting its first counter. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with his bird. Sean takes it and Charles passes the turn. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Sean with Derevi. Sean takes it, Derevi triggers, and Drake untaps Derevi. Still locked out of the game, Drake passes. During his upkeep, Cal wins his mana crypt roll. He draws and, also still locked out of the game, takes no actions and passes. Sean draws, takes no actions, and passes. Charles draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga gets another counter. He activates Weathered Wayfarer, fetching up an Ancient Tomb into his hand. He plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Wandering Archaic. In response, Drake casts Force of Will, paying a life, exiling a blue card, countering Archaic. Charles moves to combat and attacks Sean with his bird. Sean takes it, and Charles gives the turn to Drake. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Sean with Derevi. Sean takes it, Derevi triggers, and Drake untaps Derevi. With nothing else to do, Drake passes. During his upkeep, Cal wins his mana crypt roll. He draws, takes no actions, and passes. At the end of Cal's turn, Sean casts Intuition. He fetches up a Life from the Loam, Beseju Who Endures, and a Cephalid Colosseum. Cal gives him Colosseum. Sean moves to his turn. During his draw step, Sean dredges Life from the Loam back to his hand. He plays a Cephalid Colosseum for turn. Omnath triggers, and Sean gains 4 life. Cobra triggers and adds a blue. He cracks his Colosseum, drawing 3 and discarding 3, including Life from the Loam. He taps his Fiery Islet to help cast Green Sun Zenith, where X equals 5. The table deliberates a bit, but decide to let it resolve. Sean then fetches up a Titania, Protector of Argoth, onto the battlefield, shuffling Green Suns back into his library. The table didn't expect that creature to hit the battlefield, and Titania triggers. Sean returns Misty Rainforest to the battlefield. Omnath triggers, and Sean adds 4 mana. Cobra triggers and adds a green. Sean casts Sylvan Library. He moves to combat and attacks Drake with Omnath. Drake blocks with the warrior, and Sean ends his turn. Charles draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga triggers. In response, Charles taps his Ancient Tomb to activate Saga, creating a construct. He then sacrifices Saga, fetching up a Soul Ring onto the battlefield. He plays the Flagstones of Trocaire for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with his bird. Sean takes it, and Charles passes the turn. Drake draws and plays a City of Traders. He casts Culling Ritual. In response, Charles activates Weathered Wayfarer, fetching up a War Room into his hand. Still in response, Sean cracks his Misty Rainforest, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. Omnath triggers, and Sean gains 4 life. Cobra triggers and adds a white. Titania triggers, and Sean creates an Elemental. Still in response to Ritual, Sean casts Silence. Drake sighs, and Silence resolves. Then Culling Ritual resolves, destroying all non-land permanents mana value 2 or less, and then Drake adds 14 mana. Unfortunately, he cannot do anything with it, so Drake moves to combat. He attacks Sean with Derevi. Sean takes it, Derevi triggers, and Drake untaps Derevi. Finished up, Drake passes to Cal. Cal draws and plays a Swamp. He passes. During his draw step, Sean dredges Life from the Loam back to his hand. In his main phase, he casts Life from the Loam, returning Windswept Teeth, Misty Rainforest, and Cephalid Colosseum to his hand. He plays a Windswept Teeth for turn. Omnath triggers, and Sean gains 4 life. He cracks his Windswept Teeth, pays a life, and fetches up a Hallowed Fountain into play untapped, paying 2 life. Omnath triggers, and Sean adds 4 mana. Titania triggers, and Sean creates an Elemental. Next, Sean cracks his Fiery Islet to draw a card. Titania triggers, and Sean creates an Elemental. He moves to combat and attacks Drake with Titania and Charles with Omnath. They both take it, and Sean passes the turn. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts Grasp of Fate. It enters, and he exiles Drake's Derevi and Sean's Omnath. He intentionally leaves Yawgmoth with the agreement that Cal should use it to help get some of Sean's creatures off the board. Next, Charles taps his Ancient Tomb to help recast his commander, 8.5 Tails. Charles gives the turn to Drake. Drake draws and casts Ad Nauseam. Ad Naus resolves, and Drake reveals a Cabal Ritual, Flusterstorm, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, Diabolic Intent, Forbidden Orchard, Brain Freeze, Spire of Industry, Veil of Summer, Volcanic Island, Demonic Consultation, Badlands, Fierce Guardianship, Gamble, Deadly Rollick, Silence, Imperial Seal, Worldly Tutor, and Heuristic Study, taking him to 1 and deciding to stop there. This was an unfortunate ad nauseam since he basically got no fast mana to kick off his pile, so he thinks for a second and decides what his line should be. Drake plays a Forbidden Orchard for turn. City of Traders triggers and he sacrifices it. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding Spire of Industry. He casts Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Flusterstorm. Drake casts Lion's Eye Diamond. He taps his Forbidden Orchard, giving Charles the Spirit to cast Demonic Consultation. He holds priority and sacrifices his LED, discards his hand, and adds 3 red. Consultation resolves, and Drake names Underworld Breach. He begins to flip the first 6, and Underworld Breach was the first card. So unfortunately, Drake exiles his entire library. Now, completely out of the game, Drake passes. Cal draws and casts Cult Conscript. He moves to combat and attacks Drake with Yawgmoth. Drake takes it and dies. In his second main phase, Cal activates Yawgmoth, paying a life, sacrificing Cult Conscript, putting a -1/-1 counter onto Titania, and drawing a card. He plays a Phyrexian Tower for turn. Cal ends his turn. At the end of Cal's turn, Sean casts Mystical Tutor. He fetches up a Green Sun Zenith onto the top of his library. The turn moves to Sean. Sean draws and plays a Cephalid Colosseum. He cracks it, drawing 3 and discarding 3. Titania triggers and Sean creates an Elemental. He casts Green Sun Zenith where X equals 1. He fetches up a Sylvan Safekeeper onto the battlefield, shuffling Green Suns back into his library. He moves to combat and attacks Charles with Titania and 2 Elementals and Cal with Eternal Witness. Charles blocks Titania with 8.5 tails. Before damage, Sean activates Sylvan Safekeeper, sacrificing 3 lands, giving his Elemental Shroud until the end of turn. Titania triggers 3 times, and Sean creates 3 Elementals. Then they all take it, and Titania dies. Sean gives the turn to Charles. Charles draws and plays a War Room. He casts Sword of Feast and Famine. He equips the sword to his spirit. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with his spirit. Sean takes it, and Swords triggers. In response, Charles taps his Ancient Tomb and floats mana. Then Sword's ability resolves, Sean discards a card, and Charles untaps his lands. Before mana fades, Charles pays a life to activate War Room, drawing a card. In his second main phase, Charles casts Ambitious Farmhand. It enters, and Charles fetches up a Plains into his hand. Charles passes. Cal draws, takes no actions, and passes. Sean draws and moves to combat. He attacks Charles with everything. Charles blocks an Elemental with Farmhand. Before damage, Charles casts Unexpectedly Absent, targeting another Elemental, putting the token on top of Sean's library, making it cease to exist. Then Charles takes the rest and dies. When Charles dies, Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. Sean's Omnath re-enters, triggers, and Sean draws a card. Sean passes. At the end of Sean's turn, Cal flashes in, an Opposition Agent. Cal draws and activates Yawgmoth, paying a life, sacrificing Opposition Agent, giving Sylvan Safekeeper a -1/-1 counter, and drawing a card. He plays a Swamp for turn. He activates Cult Conscript, returning it to the battlefield. He activates Yawgmoth, pays a life, sacrificing Cult Conscript, giving Eternal Witness a -1/-1 counter, and drawing a card. Seeing the writing on the wall, Cal passes. Sean draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. Omnath triggers and Sean gains 4 life. He moves to combat and attacks Cal with everything. Cal dies, and Sean wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a match. Congrats to Sean on his win. Many people think that the only way to win in CEDH is combo off and put a certain merfolk onto the battlefield. Sean showed tonight that you can absolutely win through overwhelming advantage and combat beats. CEDH is EDH at the end of the day, and this format is far from solved. Sean showed us all that tonight, and we hope that you will take his inspiration and try it out at your own CEDH tables. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like this, be sure to subscribe. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.